Welcome, my dear traveler. Tonight, we wander down a snowy lane to the Weasleys' Burrow, where holiday magic hums in the frosty air. Picture yourself stepping into a cozy, cluttered kitchen, the scent of warm gingerbread curling around you as enchanted tinsel glints in the firelight. Before you settle in, please give the video a thumbs up and subscribe if you truly love what I create here. Also, leave a comment with your location and local time. I'm curious to see where you're joining us from. Now, lower the lights. Perhaps switch on a fan for a gentle hum. And let's drift into tonight's adventure together. The wind outside is a restless thing, whispering along the hedgerows and brushing the frozen tops of sleeping grasses with a sound like soft, old paper. It tugs at your scarf and nips your ears, and you think the sky looks like a blanket of pale wool pulled close to the world. Beyond the frost tips and the slender bones of winter trees, the Burrow rises from the countryside as if it grew there. Red brick and patchwork roofs and wonky chimneys stacked in cheerful defiance of gravity. Smoke curls up in a slow ribbon, and somewhere in that drifting thread of gray, you catch a passing hint of wood smoke and cinnamon, as if the house is already sending its welcome out to meet you at the gate. Your boots crackle on a path set with old stones, each one slick with a sugar crust of ice. The garden sleeps in the hush of December. Little signs of Weasley life tucked into the corners. A leaned broom, stiff with cold bristles, beside the porch. Flower pots turned upside down like little red hats. A scarecrow jacket flapping lazily on its post. And along the sagging fence, a few snowballs sit in a shy little pile, as if they have been patiently waiting since last winter for the right pair of mittens. Ahead, golden window panes glow in the dim afternoon, blurred with condensation and fogged by heat and steam, so that the figures moving behind them are smudges and silhouettes, hints of an elbow, a tumble of hair, a hand setting something on a sill. You realize the house is not quiet at all, not to anyone who has learned how to listen. It creaks like old trees do, merrily, comfortably. And when the breeze pauses, you hear the rounded clink of plates meeting plates, a faint laugh from somewhere you cannot place, and the bright cluck of a kettle fussing toward the boil. Before your knuckles can reach the wood, the door swings in with a cheerful puff of warm air. And there is Molly Weasley, cheeks pink with kitchen heat, flour dust clinging to her apron, eyes kind as lamplight. She does not just speak. she gathers, and you are swept inside by her hands and her voice and the house itself, all urging you over the threshold. The cold peels away from you in a hush, and warmth wraps your shoulders like a shawl. The air is thick with tender smells, bread turned out of a tin not long ago, something rich and savory humming in a pot, treacle and butter and cloves cozying up together, and a prickle of peppermint that makes you think of mugs of cocoa with cream melting low and sweet. The door closes with a close friend's thud, and the wind becomes a memory. Your fingers tingle as they thaw, and you notice how everything has its own little life. The hat stand, a polite sentinel, the skates dangling from it, clinking together like soft bells, the umbrella leaning in a bit nearer to hear what Molly says when she fusses your scarf off. The hallway is narrow in an amiable way, lined with picture frames that blink and breathe and talk among themselves. Bill, much younger and neat-haired, grins at you before returning to wrestling Charlie into a headlock, both of them laughing, while a pair of gnomes in another frame try to climb the edge. In one, a very small Ginny toddles with a toy broom that bumps the skirting and then scoots away, as if it knows better than to be caught. The floorboards greet your steps with creaks that sound pleased rather than worn. You can feel the warmth breathing up from the kitchen, and the glow from the sitting room beckons sideways, where a broad fireplace is holding an orange nest of flame that licks up and purrs. The sofa facing it is a squashy quilt of cushions in friendly colors, the sort of place that makes you want to sink until the house forgets where you end and the cushion begins. A couple of knitted blankets lounge there like cats, bright stripes and quiet tweeds, and beside a rocking chair sits a basket where yarns in pumpkin and moss and dusk blue curl around each other. Two knitting needles click and whisper all by themselves, looping a scarf that looks like late autumn leaves, remembered in winter. You watch them for a heartbeat longer than you mean to. The needles working with the patience of old magic. And when the scarf reaches the end of a row, it gives a proud little shiver before beginning again. A thump above announces someone crossing a room with more enthusiasm than stealth, and a muffled burst of laughter follows like a shaken snow globe. Molly sighs, not at all cross, and her fondness rolls off her voice like steam. She pats your shoulder and steers you toward the kitchen, where copper pots hang from the ceiling and catch the firelight in warm coins. The long table in the middle is scarred and smooth and loved. The kind of table that has listened to every story anyone who sat at it needed to tell. Its surface is a festival of now and soon, sprigs of holly waiting to be tucked along shelf edges, a spool of ribbon with a stubborn end that keeps slipping away, a scattering of crumbs from something stolen and eaten while still too hot, a mixing bowl with a wooden spoon standing at attention, and a few mugs that smell faintly of peppermint as they cool. Something clatters a little at the sink, and you turn to see a parade of plates bobbing in a delighted queue, sliding themselves into soapy water before a scrub brush swoops in with brisk, proud strokes. The water glows a soft, pearly color, as if it has memorized summer sunshine and saved it for afternoons like this. A tea towel floats by in a prim little bustle, patting a plate and turning it so it can admire its own shine. You think that if you reached out your hand, the house might take it, and you would be led from coziness to coziness as a guest of honor. Beyond the far doorway, you glimpse a room that could only belong to Arthur. Everything is orderly in a way that is unmistakably curious. Dismantled plugs and odd switches arranged like museum pieces on a shelf. A car battery with a paper tag tied to it in careful handwriting. Tin lunch boxes and coils of wire, and a radio that looks as if it is holding its breath for the chance to speak. A pile of magazines leans against a chair, their covers full of smiling families and impossible gadgets, and the room smells gently of dust and metal, and that particular happiness that comes from wondering how things work. You are not left with your wonderings for long, because from the stairs comes the skitter of feet, the thud of a heel missing a step, and then Ron appears, hair rumpled and sweater a bit crooked, face split into a grin that could warm a teapot. "You made it," he says, and there is a small embarrassment when he notices the flower on your shoulder, and then he is laughing and brushing it off without much success. "Come on," he says, "you have to see the clock." And before you can ask which clock he means, you are standing in front of a tall, handsome grandfather clock that tells you anything but the time. Its hands are engraved with names, golden letters that catch the light, and they drift toward places like home, school, traveling. And the unnerving little wedge marked mortal peril. The hands twitch and think and make up their minds, and you watch the one that says Ron waver between upstairs and dawdling in a way that makes him try very hard not to look pleased. Molly flits back to the stove with a stir and a taste and a satisfied nod, and when she passes by, you catch the accidental joy of her humming. The kitchen has found its after-lunch quiet, useful, and unhurried. And you understand that this is a house that breathes and feeds and keeps. Ron tugs your sleeve, and the staircase groans and chuckles under you as you begin to climb. The walls lean in a little here and there, like old friends who want to hear how you have been. And the banister feels warm under your hand from thousands of other hands, a polish rubbed in by years of habit. Along the way are more photographs and a scattering of school notices and drawings. A parchment with a phoenix painted in bright, brave swirls by a small hand, and an older announcement with an ink blot shaped like a comet. On the landing, a window stands a few inches open, and the winter air presses its cool mouth to your cheek. From outside comes the soft talk of trees and a faint, distant caw. Here the smells shift. Cinnamon and cloves still lingering up the stairwell like secret letters, but now also the clean tang of broom polish and the woolly whisper of knitted jumpers drying on a rack near a stove you cannot see. A door at the end of the hall swings toward you as if it has been waiting impatiently for your knock. And Ron creeps inside as though trying not to disturb a very light sleeper, which turns out to be a chess piece lying on its side on the floor. The room is a lively mix of Quidditch posters, their players whipping around with exaggerated bravado, and stacks of things that have learned to balance by necessity. Books leaning into socks, leaning into a telescope box, a frog spawn of chocolate frog cards spilled in a glittering island on the rug. If you nudge a pawn with the toe of your shoe, it issues a tiny offended squeak and rights itself with a sniff. You perch on the edge of the bed while Ron rummages beneath it for something that was definitely there yesterday, and a familiar pattern emerges that feels like the Burrow itself. Not perfectly tidy, not fussy, but full of happy usefulness. You discover a sweater that has wandered behind a chair in search of company. You rescue a rolled poster being slowly eaten by the wardrobe door. And when Ron throws himself backward on the mattress with a groan of triumph, he holds up a very fine, slightly muddied keeper's glove that looks as if it has a story of its own to tell. He sets it on the windowsill, where the gray light makes it look noble and well-loved, and the glove oozes with relief, content to watch the field beyond the orchard for a while. Outside, winter sits softly on the ground. The orchard trees are a lace of black branches traced against the sky, and beyond them, the fields go on in gentle swells, a quilt of sleeping earth under a skim of frost. The barn roof is dusted white, and from its rafters you can see the shadow of the family ghoul's daytime nap. A long, contented lump that turns a little and sighs with the satisfaction of being a ghoul with no responsibilities in particular. The sight makes you strangely peaceful. The notion that even the odd creatures of the burrow have their own quiet bedtime and their own favorite rafters. Ron's voice drifts in and out as he tells you who scored what in which match, and you follow along, not so much with the facts as with the feeling, the way his hands describe the curve of a sauve, the fall of a shot gone wide. He asks if you are hungry, which is almost a rhetorical question in this house, and then he is off again to investigate the kitchen, leaving you with a promise to come back with something that might once have been called a biscuit, but has since grown into a meal. The room is still. Dust motes swirl in the slant of light and pretend to be snow. The posters keep flying in their frame worlds, tiny blurs of determined faces and wind-blown hair. Left alone, you wander. The hall is a geography of voices and memories, every doorway breathing a different temperature of sound. One room holds a soft hum that could be a lullaby being remembered. Another, a clatter and wheeze that must be a stack of trunks arguing gently about who gets which corner. There is a bathroom where the mirror has been taught to be both honest and kind, and it clucks at a stubborn curl near your temple until it settles into a soft wave. A little table with a dish of buttons and a tangle of shoelaces sits near a stair turn, the exact place where someone very young once learned how to tie a bow on their own. You go down a few steps and up a few more, and find that the house smiles at your willingness to let it lead. You drift back toward the first floor and pause at the threshold of the sitting room again, because the fire is laughing to itself and the armchairs have changed posture since you last saw them, which is to say, they have become even more inviting. The mantel holds an assortment of treasures that only look random until you listen. A chipped teacup with a sprig of rosemary that makes the air taste like memory. A jar of seashells that hush the room when you lean in. A photograph of Arthur and Molly at some festival, younger and breathless, with the kind of joy that makes you think they must still feel that way on certain mornings. The radio in the corner crackles and clears its throat and offers a waltz that sounds like a snowfall tumbling through starlight. Ron returns with a plate balanced in one hand, triumph on his face and crumbs on his sweater. And behind him trails the floating tea tray that must have been convinced by someone that its talents were required upstairs. You take a biscuit that is really not a biscuit at all, dense with dried fruit and a little honeyed crunch at the edges. And the warmth of it is a hush beneath your ribs. Tea pours itself in a gentle amber ribbon, and the cup finds your hand as if it already knows the shape of your fingers. Molly calls up the stairwell to ask if the tray found you, and the kettle whistles once in answer, a bit pleased with its own helpfulness. When Arthur comes in from the shed, he smells like bright, cold air and those same mysteries you saw on his shelves, and he looks delighted to discover that you have wandered everywhere you pleased without getting lost. The stairs have a way of putting you back where you meant to be, he says, and he pats the banister like it is an old dog. He asks you a few questions about a toaster you might have seen one time, and whether you think the difference between a plug and a plug adapter could be a cultural matter rather than a practical one. And you answer as well as you are able, because it matters to him in the best possible way. The afternoon thins toward evening, but in the Burrow, it is not a dimming so much as a deepening. Lamps awaken one by one, their shades wearing golden halos, and the windows become mirrors where the house can see itself. Firelight and garlands and all. You pass again by the Weasley clock, and the hands have rearranged themselves in a new pattern that feels like a secret message you have been allowed to read. One points to home, and you do not have to see which name it bears to know that it includes you now, folded into the meaning as naturally as breath. Molly calls down that supper is not nearly ready yet, and that this is absolutely not an invitation to pretend you are starving and need a sandwich to survive, which is a remarkably effective way to summon the clatter of plates and the appealing squeak of a breadboard. And before you know it, you are sitting at the long table with a small slice of something that tastes strongly of nutmeg and memory, and a little pot of jam that insists you try just a tiny bit more. The talking around you is soft and everyday, and exactly what you did not know you were missing. You could remain here forever and learn the rhythms of this house as if it were a song. When to nod, when to fetch more plates, when to lean back and let the fire tell the story. The day settles its head on the windowsill. Outside the orchard, the light blooms into a dusky blue, and somewhere off near the lane, a fox coughs in a polite way, as if apologizing for interrupting. Upstairs, the ghoul turns over and resumes a different kind of snore, more nasal and curiously buoyant, which makes Arthur glance up with the affectionate concern of a landlord who worries the roof beam might be a little drafty. The tea tray clears its throat, eager to be of service again. And Ron promises that later you will like the view from the topmost landing, where the stars sit close and bright. And you nod, because of course you will. It is that kind of night, the kind where the world is close enough to touch, and the house is an extra blanket against the cold. You carry your empty cup to the sink, and the brush hops into action with a pleased little splash. And you stand for a moment where the table meets the window, hands resting on the wood that so many other hands have warmed, and you look out at the path you walked. The snow that has not fallen yet seems to hover in thought, the air tasting of it, a sweetness and a hush. You think of the red train that has brought so many here, and the platform that appears when you believe it will, and you feel the same magic here in the way hinges swing before you ask, and the fire sings when you listen, and the clock says home when you are not sure where you belong. Ron taps your shoulder and points out a small framed drawing near the pantry, a castle with more towers than it could possibly need, each topped with flags that look like birds. He tells you Ginny drew it when she was little, and then tore the corner because she thought the moon looked wrong, and Molly kept it anyway and says the torn edge makes the moon look as if it is shining. The drawing nods modestly, accepting the compliment. You wonder what you will give to the house during your time here. What tiny artifact of you will slip into some corner and become a part of the way this place remembers. The wind flutters at the eaves, trying to see in, and fails happily. Warmth holds the rooms in careful arms, and the Burrow hums like a kettle, not quite at the boil, content, ready, full of friendly intention. If you stand very still, you can feel the seam between outdoors and in as a soft line across your shoulders, and you choose the inside gladly, slipping your coat onto a peg where it will take on the smell of baking and pine. Someone somewhere upstairs laughs, and someone else groans in pretend despair, and the sounds fold themselves into the rafters like birds making nests. Later, you will help hang garlands that know how to climb where you point. You will learn which step near the top mumbles if you step too firmly. You will see the orchard under moonlight and the sleeping field that waits with patient joy for the first real snow. For now, you are a guest and also a thread, being stitched quietly into the fabric of a house that has outwitted gravity and winter and every ordinary rule by trusting its own kind heart. You exhale, and it feels like you have finally set something down you did not realize was heavy. The kettle gives a soft sigh of agreement, and somewhere deep in the house, A clock that does not tell the time tells you anyway. In letters you cannot see, but can somehow hear that you arrived, and that the first impression is not really an impression at all, but a welcome that keeps widening like the glow of a lamp in a window, pulled close against the early dark. The fir tree gives one last contented rustle as it nestles into the corner, its branches still dusted with the chill from outside. Ron wipes his hands on his jumper as though he's done something heroic, while Charlie crouches to adjust the base so it stands perfectly straight, his breath fogging faintly in the cooler air, drifting from the doorway. The smell of pine sharpens, filling the sitting room with the forest's quiet voice, mingling with the sweeter, spicier notes wafting from the kitchen. Molly steps back, one hand on her hip, tilting her head like a painter about to begin. "Right," she says. "Let's see what we've got this year." Her wand flicks upward, and somewhere overhead there's a muffled thump. Then the faint, delighted squeal of something that hasn't been disturbed since last December. The box of decorations begins its slow descent from the attic, bobbing gently in midair as if being lowered on an invisible rope. Dust motes swirl around it, catching the lamplight in tiny golden bursts, and a faint cough comes from above. The ghoul, no doubt, grumbling about the intrusion into its winter dreams. George leans close to you as the box settles on the floor. "We woke it up once at 3 a.m. when we were little," he whispers, his eyes bright with mischief. "It threw a pair of old boots down the stairs at us. One of them still had a gnome hiding inside." Fred, overhearing, snorts. Best part was, the gnome bit George on the ear, and he ran screaming into Mum's room, very dignified. Molly waves her hand without turning. "I heard that," and the twins exchange matching grins, entirely unrepentant. The box creaks open on its own, revealing a jumble of colors and shapes, glass baubles, hand-sewn ornaments, silver tinsel curled like sleeping snakes. Some of the pieces hum faintly, and one in the corner emits a tiny sneeze of glitter when the lid lifts. Ginny dives in first, pulling out a small star made from folded parchment, its edges browned slightly with age. "Look," she says to you. "This was the first one I ever made." She turns it over in her hands like a precious coin before tucking it carefully into the branches near the top of the tree. You reach in and find a bauble that seems to shift its color depending on the angle of the light. Deep emerald, then soft blue, then a warm gold that lingers in your palm. Arthur notices and smiles. "Picked that one up in Diagon Alley years ago," It's charmed to match the mood of the person holding it. Right now, he pauses, eyes twinkling. I'd say it's showing you're very much at home. Meanwhile, the twins have claimed the tangle of fairy lights, holding them between them like a captive beast. Gentle, gentle, Fred says in mock seriousness, as George makes the lights snake and coil, their soft glow pulsing in time with some invisible rhythm. Molly catches sight of them, winding the string around the sofa, and fixes them with a look so practiced that the lights instantly unwind themselves and float obediently toward the tree. Charlie approaches with a handful of ornaments shaped like tiny dragons, each one curling its tail protectively around a jewel. He places them low enough for the firelight to catch their scales, and you notice how their eyes glitter like embers whenever someone walks past. Ginny drapes strings of popcorn and cranberries across the branches, and the tree seems to shiver in approval. A faint scent of frost and pine sap rising each time an ornament finds its home. Through all of this, the house itself seems alive with quiet participation. The broom in the corner sweeps up stray needles without needing to be told, dusting them into a neat pile by the hearth. The clock on the mantel ticks in time with the faint hum from the garlands, which slither gracefully up the walls and across doorways. In the kitchen, something stirs in a pot without any visible hand, and the kettle murmurs as though discussing the weather with the teapot. You're helping Ginny loop a ribbon through a delicate silver bell when the first snowflake drifts past the window. It lands on the glass and melts almost immediately. But another follows, and another, until the garden beyond is blurred by a gentle fall of white. Ron notices and calls out, and soon the whole family is gathered at the window, watching the snow settle on the garden gnomes and the sagging fence. Fred makes a half-serious suggestion about starting a snowball fight right then and there, but Molly points her wand toward the tree and reminds him there's work to be done first. As the snow thickens outside, the rooms grow brighter in contrast, every candle and lantern casting a golden pool of light. The smell of baking has deepened into something rich and buttery, biscuits cooling under hovering cloths, a pie on the counter releasing a slow curl of steam. Molly calls you over to taste a spoonful of something from the pot, and the warmth of it spreads instantly through your chest, the spices lingering like a memory you can't quite place. Back in the sitting room, the final ornaments are going up. George has somehow persuaded a small, enchanted snitch to perch at the very top of the tree, its wings occasionally fluttering as if it might take flight. Charlie sets a miniature broomstick across two sturdy branches, and Ginny tucks a knitted pygmy puff into the crook of another. The fairy lights have settled into a steady glow now, twinkling whenever someone laughs. Arthur returns from the hallway, carrying a small, battered box. "Last touch," he says, and opens it to reveal the tree topper, a star made of brass and tiny pieces of colored glass, each pane catching the light in a different way. The edges are a little bent, and one pane is cracked. But when he places it on the highest branch, the entire tree seems to sigh with happiness. The star flares softly, and for a moment it looks as if the snow outside has paused midair to watch. No one speaks for a few breaths. The room is filled with that rare, perfect stillness that settles after shared work, when everyone can see themselves reflected in what they've made together. The fire hums low. The snow drapes itself thicker over the garden, and the Burrow, with its leaning walls and warm windows and heart that beats in laughter, feels like it has pulled you fully into its rhythm. In the corner, Molly is already gathering the empty boxes, her wand flicking to send them back toward the attic. The garlands sway as they pass, as though waving goodnight. Fred and George exchange some silent conspiracy that will surely be revealed later. Ginny sinks into the armchair with a ball of yarn, and Arthur leans against the mantel, gazing at the tree with a look you suspect is part memory, part pride. The warmth isn't just in the heat of the fire or the comfort of the room. It's in the way they move around each other, weaving you into their motions without hesitation. The Burrow's magic, ancient and gentle, wraps itself around you too, and you know you've been claimed as one of its own for as long as you choose to stay. Fred is the first to break the quiet admiration of the tree, clapping his hands together in a brisk imitation of Molly. "Right then, all this noble work has made me absolutely faint with hunger," he announces, pretending to wobble on his feet. George catches him dramatically and steers him toward the kitchen, muttering something about emergency biscuits. Molly gives them both a look sharp enough to peel a potato, but her lips twitch all the same. The migration toward the long kitchen table happens the way snow falls on a still day, unhurried, but inevitable. The chairs seem to know where each person belongs, scooting a few inches this way or that to make room for elbows and knitting baskets and the small stool that Ginny insists on using, even though she's long since grown tall enough for a proper chair. Someone, perhaps the house itself, has already set out plates, each one a little mismatched, but polished to a warm gleam. Cutlery floats in from the sink, clinking softly, as it settles into place beside folded napkins that smell faintly of lavender. Molly moves between stove and table with the grace of someone who has done this 1,000 times, her wand stirring one pot while her hands lift a pie from the oven. The smell is rich and savory, meat and herbs wrapped in a buttery crust that crackles as she sets it down. Next comes a tureen of soup, steam curling into the air like invisible ribbons, carrying the scent of leeks and potatoes, and something that makes your mouth water just to breathe it in. A basket of rolls follows, each one still warm enough to make the butter melt instantly on contact. Arthur brings in a jug of pumpkin juice and a pot of tea, setting them side by side as if the table should have both for balance. Charlie appears with a dish of roasted vegetables, the edges crisped to perfection, while Ron trails behind, carrying a tray of something that looks suspiciously like treacle tart. And judging by the way he's holding it, he's already tested a piece. Once everyone is seated, the noise swells. Chairs scrape, spoons clink against bowls, and the air fills with overlapping voices. Fred tells a wildly exaggerated tale about how George nearly lost an eyebrow in a fireworks experiment. George interrupts to insist that it was, in fact, Fred's eyebrow, and that it grew back mostly straight. Ginny rolls her eyes and asks you in a conspiratorial whisper if they were always like this, then grins when you admit you've only just met them. Molly insists you take a second helping before you've even finished your first. And when you protest that you couldn't possibly, she waves the words away like a puff of flour. Nonsense. You need feeding up. Too thin, you are? Arthur asks you about Muggle trains, leaning forward with genuine curiosity. And soon you find yourself explaining timetables and ticket stubs while he nods as though you're revealing the secrets of the universe. As the plates empty, the conversation shifts into that comfortable rhythm families find without thinking, teasing here, reminiscing there, the occasional burst of laughter that makes the cutlery jump slightly on the table. Every so often, a bit of magic hums in the background. A jug refills itself just before it's empty. A roll drifts politely toward the hand reaching for it. A spoon stirs in a mug that no one is holding. By the time dessert arrives, slices of treacle tart and a dish of clotted cream, the snow outside has thickened into a steady curtain. The windows have fogged with the warmth of the room, blurring the night into a soft glow. You can just make out the dark shapes of the orchard trees, their branches now wearing a silver-white coat. After the last crumbs are gone, The plates clear themselves with a soft chime, stacking neatly in the sink where brushes are already at work. Molly shoos everyone away from helping, insisting the kitchen knows what to do. The family drifts back into the sitting room, some settling by the fire, others finding spots at the table for a game of exploding snap. Fred and George argue over the rules, which seem to change depending on who's winning, while Charlie and Arthur take turns coaxing the old wireless into finding a decent station. You find yourself drawn to the hearth, where the flames burn low and steady, painting the room in shades of gold and amber. The sofa welcomes you with a sigh, its cushions molding perfectly to your shape. Ginny curls into the armchair beside you, a half-finished scarf pooling in her lap, her needles clicking softly. Ron sits cross-legged on the rug, flipping through a Quidditch magazine, but clearly listening to every word of the card game behind him. The fire crackles, and outside, the snow hushes the world. The house feels wrapped in a spell of its own, not the kind you cast with a wand, but the kind woven from years of warmth and welcome. The only light comes from the hearth, the faint twinkle of the tree's fairy lights, and the occasional flare of sparks when the logs settle. Somewhere in the walls, the pipes sigh contentedly, carrying warmth to the farthest corners of the burrow. Someone begins humming. You think it might be Molly, but it could just as easily be the house, a low, wordless tune that seems to fit the rhythm of the snow outside. The game at the table grows quieter, the laughter softer, as though everyone has slipped into the same dream. Ginny's knitting slows, her eyelids drooping, and Ron eventually abandons his magazine to stretch out on the rug, one arm flung over his eyes. The quiet is the kind that holds you, not the kind that waits to be broken. It's the quiet of deep winter evenings, when the day's work is done and the night has nothing to demand of you but rest. The warmth seeps into you, loosening something you didn't know was tight. And for a moment, you feel as much a part of the burrow as the beams overhead or the fire in the grate. Molly eventually drifts in from the kitchen, drying her hands on her apron as she surveys the room. Her eyes linger on each person for a heartbeat. Charlie in the corner, with one of Arthur's muggle books, brows furrowed. Ginny half asleep over her knitting. The twins pretending to focus on their game, while subtly trying to enchant the cards to cheat for them. Ron snoring lightly on the rug, and the smile that curves her mouth isn't loud or proud, just quietly certain, like someone tucking a blanket over something precious. Arthur sets down his mug of tea and stands, disappearing for a moment into the hallway. When he returns, he's carrying a small wooden box, the kind that looks older than the house itself. thought it might be a good night for these," he says, settling back into his chair by the fire. He opens the lid, and inside is a collection of tiny glass animals, each no bigger than your thumb. They are delicately made, some with colored swirls in their bellies, others with wings so thin they look like they could fold in the heat. With a tap of his wand, they stir to life, stretching and blinking as though waking from a nap. A glass fox pads along the mantelpiece, its tail catching the light, while a pair of birds circle lazily near the ceiling before settling in the tree branches. A tiny silver cat curls on the arm of the sofa near you, purring with a faint, crystalline hum. The room watches them in companionable silence, the magic soft and unshowy, as if the glass creatures are simply old friends, come in from the cold. Outside, the snow has deepened. The garden fence is now just a gentle mound, and the gnome statues wear rounded caps of white. The orchard beyond is still and black, every branch tipped with a dusting that glitters faintly in the moonlight. The only movement is the slow drift of flakes, each one spinning gently toward the earth, as if reluctant to land. The fire's glow pulses gently against the walls, and the air smells of pine, cinnamon, and the faint mineral scent of fresh snow carried in on someone's boots. Somewhere in the rafters, the ghoul shifts and sighs, settling again. You lean back, your eyes half closed, letting the warmth press into your skin, the voices and sounds blurring into one long, safe note. A low whistle comes from the kettle in the kitchen, and Molly rises to pour more tea. She doesn't ask. She simply sets a steaming mug in your hands a moment later, the porcelain radiating heat. The tea tastes faintly of mint and chamomile, each sip loosening you further into the cushions. The mug is chipped on one side, and you wonder how many hands have held it before yours, how many other winter evenings it's been part of. Charlie breaks the quiet with a story about a snowstorm at the Dragon Reserve, how the wind had howled so hard it rattled the pens, how the dragons had huddled together for warmth like great, scaly cats. His voice is steady and low, and the images drift into the room like smoke. George adds something outrageous about the dragons wearing scarves, and Fred insists that if that ever happened, they'd have been knitted by Molly. She swats at him with the tea towel, but doesn't deny it. Ginny sets her knitting aside, the scarf now long enough to wrap twice around anyone's neck, and slips over to the window. "Look," she says softly. Everyone follows her gaze. Outside, The snow has stopped for now, leaving the world in a perfect stillness. The sky is a deep, velvety blue, scattered with stars that seem close enough to pluck. The moon hangs low, painting silver over the untouched drifts, and the air beyond the glass seems to hum with the kind of silence you can almost hear. Fred is the first to break it, leaning back in his chair with a sigh. Bet it's perfect for a snowball fight. Molly shakes her head immediately, but Arthur only smiles and says, "Perhaps tomorrow morning." The promise hangs in the air, warm as the firelight. The wireless crackles to life with a soft old song, something slow and lilting, the sort of tune you might dance to if no one was watching. Molly hums along under her breath as she folds a blanket over the back of the sofa. Arthur taps his fingers on the armrest in time with the music. Ginny sways slightly where she stands at the window, her gaze still on the silver-lit orchard. The glass animals begin to grow still again, finding comfortable perches. The fox curled on the mantel, the birds tucked among the branches of the tree, the little cat resettling near your knee. Its body radiates the faintest warmth, as if it's absorbed the heat of the fire. You reach down to touch it, and its tail curls lazily around your finger. Ron stirs from the rug, blinking in the firelight. "Is it late?" he mumbles. Molly smooths his hair back and tells him not to worry. The game at the table has dissolved into quiet shuffling of cards. The players more interested in the warmth of their mugs than in winning. Fred yawns, George follows suit, and Charlie stretches in his chair with a satisfied groan. The hours slip by unnoticed. The snow outside catches the moonlight. The fire burns down to embers, and the room breathes in unison. The warmth here isn't just the air or the flames. It's in the slow glances between family members, the unspoken ease, the knowledge that no one here will let the night in too far. The Burrow seems to lean closer, its crooked walls and uneven beams sheltering you from everything beyond the orchard. Eventually, Molly stands and claps her hands softly. "Bedtime," she says, in a tone that brooks no argument, but carries no sharpness. There are small groans of protest, but everyone rises, stretching and murmuring good nights. The glass animals flicker once before going still, their magic folded away until morning. Arthur closes the curtains, shutting out the silver night, and the fire sighs as it sinks lower in the grate. As you follow the creaking stairs upward, the sounds of the Burrow at night settle around you, the distant ticking of the Weasley clock, the faint rustle of wind against the roof, the soft thump of someone's door closing. A quilt waits on your bed, heavy and warm, smelling faintly of wood smoke and rosemary. You slip beneath it, and the mattress yields perfectly to your shape. Somewhere in the walls, the pipes hum, carrying warmth like a lullaby. You close your eyes to the faint chorus of the house, the ghoul's muffled sigh, the beams settling, the fire's last whisper, and the last thing you feel before sleep finds you is the steady, unshakable warmth of the Burrow holding you close, as if it has known you far longer than this one winter's night. Morning comes slow and gentle at the Burrow, the kind of light that doesn't rush you, but waits patiently outside the curtains until you're ready to notice it. The quilt holds you like it knows its job is to keep the rest of the world at bay. Somewhere below, you hear the faint rattle of pans, the occasional burst of laughter, and the muted thump of feet crossing the kitchen. The air smells faintly of baking. Already, as if Molly's been up for hours, coaxing warmth into the oven. You linger a while before finally swinging your legs over the side of the bed. The rug is soft and worn under your toes. The boards, warm from whatever charm, runs quietly through the house at night. When you pad down the stairs, voices spill into the hallway. Fred and George debating the finer points of a new game they've invented. Ginny arguing she should get to be the referee, and Ron muttering that it isn't a real game if it doesn't involve at least a few bruises. In the kitchen, Molly sets a plate of toast and eggs in front of you before you can even greet her. "Eat up," she says, with that tone that's somehow both kind and commanding. Big day ahead. You don't need to ask what she means. The snow through the windows says enough. It's thicker than last night, sparkling under a pale winter sun. The orchard branches heavy and white. The garden fence a perfect drift for snowballs. Breakfast is a lively affair, full of cross-talk and plans. Charlie mentions clearing a space in the orchard. Ron's eyes light up at the thought of a match, and the twins immediately start trying to recruit you to their side. "We need someone with a fresh perspective," Fred insists. "Someone the other team won't expect." George adds, "And if you can distract Ron long enough for us to score, all the better." Ron groans into his tea. After breakfast, the kitchen empties in a flurry of scarves, boots, and mittens. The enchanted broom in the corner zips after them, dutifully sweeping up the trail of snow they leave behind. Outside, the cold nips at your nose and cheeks, but the air is so clear, it feels like breathing something new. The orchard stands in neat rows, its floor a smooth white canvas waiting to be disturbed. Before the match, there's a round of magical games to warm up, as Fred calls it. The first is an enchanted snowball fight, which starts innocently enough, small snowballs hovering politely in the air before darting toward their targets, but quickly escalates. George charms his to spin mid-flight. Fred makes his whistle like tiny kettles, and Ginny's seem to appear out of nowhere, pelting whoever dares turn their back. Charlie constructs a shield charm around himself, which lasts all of 30 seconds before a perfectly aimed snowball from Molly shatters it, leaving him blinking in surprise while the rest of the family howls with laughter. Next comes a game that's half hide and seek, half tag, with the added complication of snowdrifts enchanted to rise and fall unexpectedly. You find yourself laughing harder than you have in months, stumbling through knee-deep snow that wasn't there moments ago, only to find Fred's head popping up beside you like some mischievous jack-in-the-box. When you finally tag him, he collapses into the snow with exaggerated defeat, and you can't help but fall down beside him, breath puffing into the crisp air. But it's the Quidditch match that everyone's been waiting for. The brooms are brought out from the shed, their bristles stiff with frost, but quickly warming to the touch once charmed. The orchard becomes the pitch, the goalposts nothing more than a few tall poles with charms to mark the scoring rings. Ron claims his spot as keeper with the determination of someone defending a fortress, while Ginny and Charlie take to the air like they were born there. You're given a slightly older broom. She's got character, George assures you. And before you can doubt yourself, you're rising into the cold blue sky, the ground shrinking beneath your boots. The air up here is sharper, cleaner, rushing past your ears with a sound that's half wind, half exhilaration. The snow-laden branches blur below as you angle into position. Fred opens the match with a toss of the quaffle, which Charlie catches effortlessly before darting toward Ron. Ginny intercepts, looping around him in a move so quick you almost miss it. And the first goal is scored to cheers from her side. The twins play with more enthusiasm than rule following, darting in to snatch the quaffle from anyone not paying attention. George passes it to you with a shout, and for a moment you're just flying, the cold biting your cheeks, the ball warm and solid in your hands. You aim for the nearest hoop, heart hammering, but Ron blocks it with a triumphant grin. "Not bad," he calls, tossing it back into play. From there, the match becomes a blur of motion. Charlie's daring dives, Ginny's precision throws, the twins' constant chatter meant to distract, and Ron's growing pride with every save. You manage to score once. A clean throw past Ron, while Fred shouts encouragement from below. And the cheer that follows warms you more than any charm. The game stretches on until cheeks are flushed, noses pink, and breath steams in great clouds. Finally, Molly calls from the doorway of the burrow, her voice carrying across the snow. "Come in before you all freeze solid." Reluctant, but laughing, everyone descends, the brooms gliding down in gentle arcs before touching the ground. Inside, the warmth hits like a soft wave. Boots are kicked off, scarves hung to dry, and the scent of hot chocolate fills the air. Molly's laid out a spread, mugs steaming, biscuits piled high, and a pie cooling on the counter. The family crowds into the kitchen again, voices overlapping, retelling the best moments of the match as though they happened years ago and are already legend. You sip your chocolate slowly, letting the sweetness linger. The sound of their laughter curling around you like another layer of warmth. Outside, the snow has begun again, soft and steady, erasing the lines of the pitch and smoothing the orchard back into stillness. The burrow hums with contentment, its walls holding the day's joy the way they hold heat, steadily, without letting it slip away. And you realize, as the mug warms your hands, that here, in this crooked, magical house filled with noise and light and kindness, winter doesn't feel like something to endure. It feels like something to belong to. Evening folds over the burrow like a quilt, stitched with the gold of lamplight and the soft silver of snow still falling beyond the windows. The laughter from the kitchen lingers in the air long after the last crumbs of pie have vanished. Your cheeks are still warm from the match, though your fingers have only just stopped tingling from the cold. Someone has hung your mittens by the fire, and they steam faintly, giving off the faint scent of wool and winter air. Molly insists everyone tidies themselves up before bed, though the way she says it is more about comfort than order. You take your turn in the washroom, where the mirror blinks awake and greets you with a polite evening, before offering unsolicited hair advice. The sink water runs pleasantly warm, scented faintly with something herbal that smells like the greenhouse in summer. When you return to the hallway, the stairs creak under your weight in that familiar way, not complaining, just acknowledging you. Upstairs, the rooms are dim, except for the glow spilling under a few doors. You pass Ron's room, where he and Harry, in this telling, visiting for the holiday, are still talking in low, animated voices about the day's match. Ginny's door is half shut, the rhythmic click of knitting needles drifting out like the softest percussion. Further along, you hear the twins in their room laughing over some private joke, the sound muffled but warm. Your own room is just as you left it. Quilt pulled back invitingly, pillow plumped, a small jug of water and a glass on the nightstand. But the house has been here while you were gone. A folded blanket now rests at the foot of the bed, and the faint scent of baking has settled into the air. From the window, you can see the orchard in the moonlight, its snow-covered branches gleaming faintly against the deep blue sky. The garden is a smooth expanse of white now, the gnomes buried up to their stone chins, the fence a soft shadow. Molly calls softly from the hallway that hot water bottles are ready. She presses one into your hands herself when you open the door, wrapped in a knitted cover, patterned in uneven stripes. That one was Charlie's when he was small, she says with a fond smile. Keeps the heat all night. You slide it under the quilt and feel the warmth radiate instantly through the sheets. Before bed, there's one last gathering downstairs. The fire is lower now, mostly embers, and the occasional crackle of settling logs. Everyone has found their most comfortable sprawl. Charlie in the armchair, with his legs stretched toward the hearth. Ginny curled in one corner of the sofa. Ron with his head tipped back, eyes half closed. Fred and George are playing a lazy game of wizard's chess, the pieces moving with a sort of drowsy reluctance. Arthur tells a short story about the first Christmas he and Molly spent at the Burrow, when the roof leaked in the kitchen and they had to hang a cauldron from the ceiling to catch the drips. Molly interrupts halfway through to correct a detail. It wasn't a cauldron, it was the copper pot she still uses for jam. And the gentle bickering that follows is as much a part of the story as the ending. The room feels layered in quiet joy, the kind that doesn't need to be spoken aloud. The fire hums, the trees' fairy lights blink slowly, and somewhere outside, a branch releases its load of snow with a soft whoomph. You sip the last of your tea, which has cooled, but still tastes faintly of cinnamon and honey. One by one, people drift off to bed. Ginny kisses her parents goodnight. The twins disappear upstairs, still murmuring to each other. Ron stumbles toward the staircase with a yawn that makes his eyes water. Charlie lingers to help bank the fire, his movements slow and practiced before following the others. Soon, it's just you, and the quiet house, Molly and Arthur murmuring softly to each other in the kitchen as they tidy the last few cups. You climb the stairs, and the burrow seems to guide you. The banister warm under your palm, the shadows soft-edged, the air holding a faint trace of pine from the tree below. Your door closes with the gentlest click. The hot water bottle has made the bed deliciously warm, and the quilt settles over you with the weight of a safe embrace. The sounds of the house at night are different from the day, smaller, closer. The occasional creak of wood, the sigh of the wind against the eaves, the faint rattle of a window somewhere down the hall. You can hear the steady tick of the Weasley clock through the floorboards, each hand no doubt pointing to home. The warmth seeps into you until your limbs feel heavy, your breathing slow. Your mind drifts lazily through the day. The crunch of snow underfoot, the wild swoop of the broom as you leaned into a turn, the laughter that followed you all the way back to the door. Each memory feels wrapped in the same glow as the room now, unhurried and whole. Your last waking thought is of the orchard under moonlight, the branches dusted silver, the sky deep and endless above it. Somewhere in that stillness, the burrow breathes around you, steady, protective, and entirely sure that you belong here. You don't notice the exact moment you fall asleep, only that the house seems to close its eyes with you, settling into its own slumber, the warmth of the day held safe until morning. Morning comes gently, as though the house is reluctant to wake you. The first light filters through the curtains in pale gold stripes, dust motes drifting lazily in its path. The quilt is warm and heavy over you. The hot water bottle now cool, but still holding the faintest trace of last night's heat. For a while, you lie there listening. The low murmur of voices downstairs, the clink of crockery, the faint pop and sigh of the fire being coaxed back to life. When you finally swing your legs out of bed, the rug greets your feet with a soft, worn welcome. The boards creak politely under your weight, announcing you to the rest of the house. Outside the window, the orchard is wrapped in a fresh layer of snow from the night before, the sky pale and clear, promising a day too cold for clouds. You start gathering your things, folding the clothes you've worn and the ones you never got to, each carrying the faint smell of the burrow. Now, wood smoke, cinnamon, the crisp bite of winter air. Your scarf is still faintly damp from yesterday's match, and you drape it over the back of the chair in the hope it'll dry before you go. The room feels smaller, without your belongings scattered in it. The quilt already smoothed back, the nightstand bare except for the empty glass. A soft knock at the door makes you turn. Molly steps in, her cheeks pink from the kitchen's heat. "Morning, love. Breakfast's nearly ready." "Don't be in a rush. There's plenty of time before you have to head off." Her eyes flicker to the folded pile on the bed, and for a moment, her smile is tinged with something you can't quite name. Downstairs, the kitchen is as warm and alive as ever. But there's a faint difference to it this morning. A softness under the chatter. The long table is set for everyone. The plates steaming with scrambled eggs, sausages, toast, and a bowl of fruit that still glistens from a rinse in cold water. There's tea in the pot and pumpkin juice in a jug, and the smell of something sweet, porridge with cinnamon and honey, drifts from the stove. The family filters in, still pulling on jumpers and rubbing at their hair. Fred and George arrive together, hair sticking up at the same angle, their grins as easy as ever. Ginny slides into her chair beside you, stealing a piece of toast before it even hits the plate. Ron yawns so wide you can hear his jaw crack, then immediately fills his plate as though he hasn't eaten in days. Breakfast moves at the usual Burrow pace, voices overlapping, chairs scraping, spoons clinking. Charlie tells a story about a dragon he swears smiled at him yesterday. Ginny argues about the rules of the snowball fight. The twins interrupt each other so often it's impossible to know what either of them was originally saying. Molly keeps your plate full without asking, as if she knows this will have to last you until next time. You're mid-bite when George clears his throat in a way that means he's about to make some kind of announcement. "Since you're leaving," he says, reaching under the table, "we thought you might need something to remember us by." Fred produces a small, lumpy parcel wrapped in bright, clashing scraps of paper and tied with what looks like a shoelace. "Don't open it yet," Fred warns immediately, which of course makes everyone lean closer. "It's nothing dangerous," George says with exaggerated innocence, "but maybe don't open it on the train." The twins exchange a look that tells you it's probably exactly the sort of thing you'd want to open on the train. You turn the package over in your hands. It's surprisingly light, and something inside shifts with a faint jingle. The wrapping smells faintly of peppermint and fireworks. You smile, tucking it into your bag as they watch with matching expressions of satisfaction. Molly fusses at the twins about appropriate gifts, but her voice is warm, her eyes soft. Arthur asks if you've got everything packed, offers to help carry your bag to the door. The fire in the hearth pops, sending a few sparks dancing up the chimney. The kitchen feels smaller all of a sudden, the light pooling in the center of the table as though reluctant to spread too far toward the edges. After breakfast, there's a slow, meandering sort of bustle, everyone helping in small ways. Though no one seems in a hurry. Ron checks the weather out the window. Ginny offers to fetch your scarf from upstairs. Charlie lingers by the fire as if he might say something, but decides not to. When it's finally time to go, the burrow feels as though it's leaning in close, its crooked beams and patchwork walls holding you a little tighter. The cold air outside is sharp after the kitchen's warmth, but the sky is bright, the snow dazzling. Molly hugs you first, her arms warm and sure. Arthur shakes your hand and claps you on the shoulder. The twins each give you a quick squeeze before reminding you, in unison, train. Open it on the train. Ginny smiles, a little shy, and says she hopes you'll come back soon. Ron just says, "Yeah, see you," in that way that means more than it sounds. You step out onto the path, the snow crunching under your boots. The windows glow behind you, and for a moment you can see them all there, framed by the crooked walls. The house itself seeming to smile. The cold nips at your cheeks, but your scarf, still carrying the faint warmth of the burrow, keeps it from biting too deep. As you walk away, the air is full of the kind of stillness that isn't empty, but full of warmth carried in your coat, in the lumpy little parcel in your bag, in the memory of a holiday that feels like it's still unfolding somewhere just behind you. And you know, without needing to turn back, that the burrow will be there next winter, leaning into the wind, its crooked chimney sending up a ribbon of smoke, waiting for the next time you come home. The train rocks in that gentle, steady way that feels almost like breathing. The rhythm hums through the seat, through your boots, into your bones. Outside the window, the landscape unwinds, fields lying still under their winter coats, hedgerows tangled with frost, the occasional farmhouse sending up a thin ribbon of smoke. The sky is a washed-out blue, the kind that carries a faint brightness, but no real warmth. And yet you feel warm all the same. Your bag rests by your feet. The twins' lumpy little parcel still tucked safely inside. You haven't opened it yet. It shifts every now and then, almost imperceptibly, as if reminding you it's there. You wonder what kind of magic they've hidden inside. Something silly, something surprising, something that will smell faintly of peppermint and fireworks. Your thoughts drift back without asking. The burrow rises behind your eyes exactly as you left it. Red brick leaning into itself, tall chimneys trailing smoke, The garden fence slouched under the weight of snow. You can still feel the kitchen's warmth on your skin, the weight of Molly's hug, the solid clasp of Arthur's hand. The taste of breakfast lingers faintly, cinnamon on porridge, the crisp edge of toast, tea sweetened just enough. You think of the quiet moments as much as the loud ones. The fire on that first night, when the house seemed to wrap itself around you. The soft clink of ornaments as you hung them on the tree. The way the fairy lights seemed to listen when someone laughed. The enchanted snowball fight that left everyone breathless and pink-cheeked. The clean bite of the air when you rose into the sky on your broom. The moment you scored and the cheer that followed, not because it was a goal, but because it was yours. The countryside slips by, but in your head, you're still in the orchard, the snow crunching under boots, your breath visible in the morning light. You can still hear Fred and George bickering over the rules of a game they'd clearly invented minutes earlier. You remember the way Ginny's scarf trailed behind her as she darted past, the twin shouts of "Watch out!" from opposite sides of the pitch, the steady shape of Ron guarding the hoops with an almost comical seriousness. The train sways into a curve, and your gaze blurs against the window. In the glass, you catch your own reflection, softened by the overlay of frost-dusted fields outside. For a moment, it feels as though the orchard could be just beyond that pain. The crooked house waiting at the end of the path. You lean your head back, closing your eyes, and the sounds come back as easily as if you'd opened a door. Molly's voice, warm and bustling, cutting through the chatter. The low thrum of Arthur's questions about Muggle things you'd barely thought about before. The soft click of Ginny's knitting needles. The way the floorboards sighed under passing feet. The creak of the stair on the way to your room. The kettle's whistle, rising and falling like a song. The parcel in your bag shifts again, and you think maybe the twins planned it that way. A little nudge every so often, just enough to pull you back to the place you're leaving. You imagine opening it later, somewhere far from the Burrow, and finding it full of something ridiculous, something bright, something that smells exactly like that kitchen on a winter morning. Outside, the fields give way to woodland, the trees bare and black against the snow. The train slows slightly, the sound of the wheels deepening. You rest your hand on the top of your bag, feeling the fabric under your palm, grounding yourself in the small weight of it. You picture the Burrow now, hours after you left. Molly clearing the breakfast things, the ghoul settling back into its rafters, the fire built up again for the day. Ron probably back in the yard with a broom, Fred and George testing whatever scheme they were whispering about, Ginny wrapped in her scarf and heading toward the orchard. It's still there, you think, alive and humming, the same as it was when you were inside it. The train dips into a shallow valley, the view briefly blocked by snow-dusted embankments. When it opens again, the sun has found its way through the clouds, scattering faint gold over the horizon. You let the light hit your face through the cold glass and think of the way the Burrow's windows glowed when you turned for that last look. The rhythm of the wheels settles into your heartbeat. You know the journey will end, and there will be other mornings, and other kitchens, and other skies. But this one, this winter, this crooked house, this place where the air tasted like cinnamon and pine, will stay folded somewhere safe, ready to be opened again whenever you need it. You glance down at the parcel. It's still now, quiet, but you imagine it holding a little spark of that light, waiting for the moment you decide to see what's inside. You smile to yourself, not rushing it. Some things are best opened slowly, the way you step into a doorway and let the warmth reach you before you cross the threshold. The countryside rolls on, the sun climbing a little higher, and the Burrow drifts gently into memory, not fading, just settling, like embers under ash, steady and warm, ready to glow again the next time you return.